I'm just going to be looking at my phone. Okay, so we are live. I'm going to make sure that I can find this on the page. Probably going to take about 30 seconds. But in the meantime, so my name is Jonna, and I also go by Grace. First of all, I want to thank you, Roxanne, for just allowing me and this audience your time and your expertise. We are really excited to know what you have to share. So, the first question I kind of want to start with is: Are you currently married?
I am dating, was
Okay.
married for 25 years and separated with one son.
Okay, you separated. You were married, and when you say separated with one son,
I
you
mean,
got a divorce.
yes, divorced.
Oh, okay. And how did that relationship start?
Out of university, we both were going to school and we were quite young. We were 18 years old and kind of the same program. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I came as a foreign student to go to school in Toronto to the University of Toronto. He was going to the same school. We just started to chit chat and start to date. And and then ended up getting married quite young. I was just turning 22,
Okay.
and he was about the same.
All right. And then in your marriage, when did you realize that it wasn't really working out?
I think it's like anything. We're pretty independent, young professionals, kind of setting up life out of school and doing all the traditional things like you do, right? Get the jobs, the houses, that kind
What
of
did you
stuff.
do? What did you all do for a profession?
I'm a psychotherapist.
Oh, so you started out at 22 as a psychotherapist?
Correct.
Wow. Oh my
Yes, yes, yes.
goodness.
So I went to do my undergrad and finished at 21 and started into the field at that point,
Wow.
into psychotherapy. And he ended up in business quite
Okay.
young as well.
When you say
Yes.
business, what does that mean?
Real estate broker.
Okay, okay, okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And then like you said, like I said before, when did you see that it was kind of getting separated? Or you
I
all
think
worked it out?
around the time, so I would say around, so we married at 22. I would say probably around 33 or so, age 33. And that was when, I was kind of slowing down, starting to think more about family and those types of things and what
Hmm.
kind of things I wanted for my life. And at that point, there was hesitation about starting a family. And at which
Hmm.
point we had started to have conversations which I think intuitively I thought, well, these are things that are just going to happen. I come from a family of six. You come from a
Hmm.
family that had children as well, not thinking that it was something that what we were diametrically opposed to, but that was the first difference at that point. And then there started to be some issues at that point where, okay, this was the first kind of major difference that we had.
Hmm.
And at that point, that's when I started to recognize that there was some concerns in the marriage.
So what was the difference? He wanted children, or you wanted children?
I
And
wanted children, and he was unsure, I would say. And I said, well, I want a family more than ever. I love you, but I want an extension. And at that point, we went into psychotherapy to see
okay,
a psychologist to kind of work through those concerns.
okay. And as you all sought help, when did you realize the help wasn't working?
I think along the way, because I mean, obviously, when you deal with a couple, you have to look at common goals, and the decision was really we ended up in therapy to make a decision about starting a family, which is a pretty kind of, I would
Wow.
say, normative kind of decision. And at that
Mhm,
point, I thought, okay, well, the decision is made. We had an amazing son,
mhm.
and you kind of there's a lot of pressures. Obviously, I don't know, Joanna, if you have kids, but
Yeah, yeah.
obviously what you don't want to bring is a child into a situation where there
Mhm.
is uncertainty and unhappiness. Sometimes people
Yes.
think it's going to make it better, but it actually
Yeah,
goes the
it's true.
opposite way.
Mhm.
And at which point, then within a year and a half, he had an affair.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
So that, the inklings of, okay, well, there was a difference. What are some of the concerns? Obviously, seeing a couple together, you have to look at, what are you willing to do? Obviously, and infidelity happens a lot. And I don't know how much you speak about this on your
Mhm.
show, but unfortunately, it's one of the major concerns that ends marriages.
Yeah.
At which point you have to be able to really work very, very hard um, to kind of address the concerns related to the breach of trust. At
Yeah.
which point there was a separation for about a year and a half and a reconciliation, but unfortunately, the steps to make it better didn't happen.
Mhm.
And then there was a 4-year reconciliation, at which point I decided I'd had enough.
Okay. Okay, so after there was infidelity, you all separated for a year and a half. And
Right.
then you all got back together for 4 years.
Correct.
And then at that point, you said, well, it's time to get a divorce.
Right. After 4 years of trying to work through things and they weren't
Uh-huh.
getting any better. Like, I mean, obviously, you have to look at
Yes.
the emotional needs
Yeah.
of both.
Hmm.
Of course, with infidelity, the most important thing is how do I then reestablish trust?
Yes.
And obviously, the person that has had the affair has to work harder. You not that you're
Right.
saying, not that you're saying yes, you breached trust. There may have been concerns previous to, but you
Hmm.
have to be able to kind of offer that safety and security to the person that you've breached that trust or hurt. That's the first step. I often say to couples, you can't move on and reestablish kind of how are we going to be happy unless you address the pain of
Right.
what occurred. And the partner that has left the marriage has to be able to really do what he or she needs to do to regain the trust of the partner that has been hurt. And that's the first step in healing. And
Right.
then at that point, once the healing, and I often say it's like the individual that's been hurt, they can breathe again a bit. At
Yeah.
that point, you start to look at what are some of the core concerns that may have developed that allowed this marriage to get to a position where one person has an affair, and to start to really have some real conscious conversations about what is it that we need to do different so we
Hmm.
don't get into a situation like that again,
Right.
where we lean away from each other, but in fact we always come back to leaning towards each other when there is uncertainty, which is sometimes difficult for couples if they don't have the skills associated with doing that.
Right. So, what was his reasoning for stepping out on the marriage?
I would say combination. I mean, if you were to ask him, I think it was it brought up some things from his past. He had lost his father really suddenly when he was quite young. And I think, if you think about having a child, that is the most vulnerable space that both people go into. You have to really put aside your own needs to really focus on this little being that needs you for mere survival. But what it
Yeah.
also does is opens up a space where if you've not dealt with some things along the way emotionally, it's like a bit of a combustion that
Okay.
occurs. And I think that's kind of what happened for him. He did make the choice, but I think it brought up a lot of other things that he had sealed off with some of his trauma from his past. And yes, he made the decision, but maybe he needed to work through some other things before he made that decision. And then the overwhelming responsibility of being a parent and running lives and trying to readjust time and
Hmm.
stress associated, good stress and bad stress. It was fantastic. The best thing that I think happened to him, but it was also the additional things of the what I call the big R responsibility that kicks
Hmm.
in for all of us, that you have to start to address.
So, when you all were in the reconciliation process and you said it wasn't working out, what was he not doing? Or if you were doing your part and you felt like he wasn't doing his part, what was he not doing?
Safety and security. I often say if your partner's not making you feel safe and secure, um, there's no way you can reestablish trust.
Hmm.
And it was done, but it wasn't done in a way that might met my needs. And I often say to I remember with myself, but when I work with couples now, I say, oftentimes the person that's hurt the other person wants to just forget it and put it in the past, right? Okay, it's happened. Let's get over it. Let's shut that
That's
door.
so
It's never
true.
good. It's never going to happen again. And and then the person that's hurt is kind of like, they're like the wounded child that's saying, hey, hold up here. I didn't know where you were going out when you were taking your kid to T-ball, or I didn't know where you were when you said you were at that late appointment. When I had that family get together and I was stuck at home, you were off having this affair. So I think
Mhm.
without that core fundamental that of remorse and that I did something wrong, really, and the
Mhm.
partner being humble and saying,
Yes.
what can I do to help your pain?
Right. Yeah.
Then that's hard, because so you have to really come up, like what I often say, with a plan first of all, with how is it that you're going to allow the other person um, to beat up on you a little bit, but in a very polite way, not in a vicious
Mhm.
way, but to
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
allow you to get to the
Yeah.
space of trust. And without vulnerability, again, there's no the inability to trust again. Of which point, and I think that was our struggle along the way. And
Mhm.
my perception is that he continued to have the affair, but I did not realize, because there was nothing. There was clues, but you're thinking,
Yeah.
this can't be happening a second time,
Oh,
but
wow.
unfortunately it was. And at which point I didn't know definitively. However, what happened was I said, enough already. This is not good for myself, my son, for us as people. And that's when I said I needed to end things on my end.
Right. And so but how is he doing now?
He's fine. He's living with his the same person, and has
Okay.
a relationship with her. Yes.
Okay. And he was he didn't want any more children. So it's just
No, no,
he's
no.
only okay,
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
and do you have another child?
No, just one.
Okay, so you
Just
just
one.
have one child
Yes.
as
Yes.
well. Okay, and now how did you or how long did it take for you to meet or heal from that and then meet your new are you dating you're dating now, right?
Yes. Dating.
You're but it's a 3-year relationship. It's a
Yeah. Yeah.
and so how long did it take you to start dating again?
Well, I started dating, I think, within a year after that. But I think it's, the first couple of relationships, you're just kind of trying to, heal
Yeah.
from it. So it took, I would say, a couple of years to just kind of really, at that point, you're a mom. I should say I was a mom to a young son
Mhm.
running, I'm an entrepreneur running a business, those types of things. So I was juggling a lot along with grieving. And I often say to people, take your time and understand, what were the patterns in that past relationship, what did
Right.
not work, what role did you play in it,
Mhm.
what part of it, as much as I wasn't the one that stepped out, what is it that I stifled within myself to get to a space where this could have happened in the relationship, to learn more about myself. And what I did was, when I separated, I actually wrote a book on it, because
Okay.
as a psychotherapist, I wanted to show the average person, regardless of who you are, we all go through things in life. And I figured, by sharing, analyzing myself like I was the patient, I could show the patterns of behavior that I perpetuated from along the way in my life, that allowed me to get to a space where there was things that I had blind spots in reference to, that in
Mhm.
retrospect I should have done a bit differently, in my marriage along the way,
Mhm.
to hold my ground, to accept and not accept certain things that I accepted along the way.
Right. And I kind of want to go back just a little bit when you said you uh during your sessions, if someone has committed infidelity, that when there's building trust, the person who committed the act needs to allow the other person to beat up on them a little bit. I do want you to kind of explain or give us examples of what that looks like.
And I say quite literally, not
Not
physically,
physically,
and
right?
berating and calling names, none of that, right? Even
Hmm.
though there's a part of you that wants to say those things, and that's
Yeah.
real.
That's real.
But I think what becomes important is creating the space so that you can deal with the pain. But however, there has to be a middle ground. So I'll give you an example. We'll
Hmm.
say, the couple will come in, and the person that wants to be hurt, they want every nuance, every detail. Where did you take him or her?
Hmm.
When did you used to call them? Do you love them? Do you still love them? All those.
Hmm.
It's like an ongoing barrage of questions. And I said, there has to be a space where you talk about things and then you let it be. Because
Hmm.
what's going to happen is, if you're actually going to make the decision to reconcile, that affairee has to stay out of the context of the rebuild. That being
Mm.
said, sometimes the person that has had the affair still has feelings. So you have to know, as a family therapist, a couples therapist, which I am, how is it that I'm going to hold the space, allow the person that's still having feelings to grieve and let go of the affairee, because let's
Mhm.
face facts, there's oftentimes feelings in there. We can pretend and say
Yes,
there's no
right.
feelings,
Mhm.
but also hold the space for the spouse that's been injured.
Right.
So what we do is, sometimes I will see both individuals separately for a bit to kind of understand their needs and help. If it's, let's say it's a her and she's been hurt, help her kind of understand her triggers and what kind of things she needs to do to take care of herself, all those things. And maybe if it's him, just talk to him about how is it that you can grieve so it doesn't impede the process of reconciliation in your marriage. What is it that you need to do to really take your energy from being out of the home back into the home? So it's a bit of both, and then
Okay.
you bring them together. When you're bringing them together, you're setting some ground rules around, okay, we're going to talk about certain things, but we're not going to do an autopsy every time we have a session of everything
Right.
that the one person
Mhm.
wants to know.
Mhm.
And then we set a limit, and I'll do something as silly as, okay, you have some questions, you're going to get a bit of a fishbowl, and the person that has the questions during the week, they put it in
Mhm.
that fishbowl. And when they
Mhm.
have times when the and skills and they're capable of talking it about it, then they maybe take one or two of those questions out, and then they
Okay.
answer it in a time context and within safety, not a free flow, which is what happens if you don't contain it. Ends up becoming the identity of the reconciliation, which we
Mhm.
don't want that to be part of it.
Okay.
We want to understand what you can learn from it, but we don't
Right.
want to live, into, if only you would have, then I would have, and then we would have, and all
Right.
of that
Right.
kind of
Right.
stuff, which is oftentimes what happens.
Right. And another question, as a psychotherapist, did you feel like when you got the divorce, that people would think like, I wouldn't get this wouldn't happen to me, as someone who deals with couples, you would think that this wouldn't happen to me. Did those thoughts ever come up?
I think as a woman, absolutely, and
Yeah.
aspirations for marriage and
Yeah.
things like that, absolutely. If any woman or were to tell you, whether she's in the profession or not, said otherwise, I don't know that she'd
Yeah.
be telling you the truth.
Right.
Absolutely, you think, well, I feel like I've failed, but then it takes two.
Yeah.
When you really look at what a long term, satisfying, healthy relationship is, it's a whole lot of hard work
It is.
and a lot of skill building that most people did not grow up with fantastic
Unfortunately.
role models. So I often say to my couples when I see them, how many people do you think are in this room with us right now? And they go, well, just us. I go, no, there's 6 people.
Mm.
There's your
Okay.
parents on either
Mm.
side, and then there's your grandparents,
Mm.
right? And what things did you really learn that helped you in being in a relationship, and what kind of things hurt you? And
Mhm.
how is it that you understand those messaging around marriage? Like, what
Wow.
is it that you perpetuate? And that was something that, when people start to look at, we do something called a genogram. I don't know if that's something most of you know about, or as a psychotherapist, we do with couples or
Mhm.
individuals, but with couples, because it helps them to recognize. If I grew up seeing alcoholism,
Mhm.
I grew up with one parent that was absent.
Okay.
So, how might that have affected my capacity if I saw one parent being physically and emotionally available and one parent's completely absent, but those people stayed together? They
Okay.
didn't
So what
divorce.
exactly is a genogram? Because I'm
A
not
G,
familiar with the term.
okay, a genogram is it's like a map. So let's say you do your genogram with myself and my husband,
Like a
right?
family tree or
Yeah, like a
something?
family
Okay,
tree.
got
And
you.
then you go back up and then you look at the history of my dad and my mom. What's their story? Like, how was their relationship? How did they get along? Could
Wow.
did they have good messaging to each other? What messages did you learn about affection by looking at them? What did you learn about roles? What did you learn about needs? What did you learn about conflict? Did
Mhm.
you think that you could have healthy conflict? Was conflict always, did it erupt into things that were less than ideal, so therefore you said nothing. So those are the things. So you go from kind of what you had and what
Mhm.
are my needs in a relationship, what are my emotional needs in a relationship, and how did I formulate that,
Right.
and how do I know what that is if I've not been exposed to it? How do you feel it? And often people will say, well, I'll look at this show on TV or whatever, but what are the true real role models out there? And not the first year where it's the bells and whistles and the cake and the dresses and the honeymoons, but 5 years out,
Mhm.
7 years out, 10 years out with
Yeah.
two young children. Maybe
Yes.
at that point you're caring for parents as well. So you need to look at what we know about the long-term research with what it takes to be happy, healthy, satisfied, maybe not ecstatic, but your overall what's happening is that your relationships, your needs are being met, but at times it's not 50-50, sometimes it's 80-10, sometimes it's 70-30, but you're recognizing that overall, what I say, it's like a figure eight. It's that
Mhm.
intersection of needs that most people's needs are met most often, so that they could say, yeah, I'm happy. Sometimes I like you. Sometimes I love you. Sometimes I'm not
Yeah.
sure about you. But ultimately, this is what long term marriage is.
Right. And before we kind of go into what you offer, I do have a question about what was the book that you wrote when after you got your divorce? You said you wrote a book. What was that
Yes,
about?
it was all about my path in separation. So I separated at age 44.
Okay.
So as a therapist, what I did is I started from the beginning of life, which of course, I didn't remember. And I analyzed my life psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, biologically, all the way from birth all to the up to the age of 44, of what and the things that may have impacted my ability to pick this person in a
Mhm.
marriage, and what kind of blind sides, or what I call, those blind spots that allowed me to replicate things from my parents' marriage,
Mhm.
but it was packaged differently
Okay.
in the present relationship. So the name of the book is A Therapist Insider's Guide on Relationships,
Okay.
Healing the Past.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much for is that the book that you were going to share? It was one book that you were going to
Yes,
share.
yes, absolutely. I have that book, and I can offer it to your readers as a free download. What we can do
Okay.
is we can provide a link for them to be able to download it. And
Okay.
also, what I do is I do a 4-week live webinar uh, training and on the concepts from the book, and then they also get an online course that's related to the book that they could also work through on their own as well.
Oh wow. The 4-week online is it pre-recorded or is it like a
No, it's
live?
live. I do it live.
Okay.
I do it monthly.
Okay.
And what I do is it's, people, upwards of, right now I'm doing it, and there's 7 people in it. I
Okay.
try to not get it any more than 10 people
Mhm.
in the group, and I teach about all the concepts that we've been discussing.
Yeah.
But of course, we kind of we do an assessment. What are the needs? What are people wanting to work through? And progressively, I address those concerns week by week for 4 weeks. They get a coaching session that's also included in that at the end, so that they can kind of wrap up and kind of formulate where they were, where they got, and maybe potentially what next steps they need to continue to
Okay.
grow, to get better in relationship. I say it starts
Right.
with us, and then eventually, once we get better with ourselves, then we're able to attract that kind of partner that people are wanting from the people that come on your show.
Right. So with the book it comes with the webinar or the webinar is something separate.
The webinar is separate. So I have just
Okay.
the one online, which is just a standalone course, which is not, it
Okay,
was
gotcha.
relatively inexpensive. And then the one up from that is the 4-week webinar
Okay.
that your guests will have the book anyway, but they will also get the pre-recorded
Mhm.
training. But then along with that, the 4 weeks of live coaching,
Okay.
along with my teaching for 4 weeks, along with group coaching within that time.
Okay. So I want to just so people can know where to find you at, what is a good website for you?
So my website is just my name. It's roxannedurhodge.com. And you can find me. I also have a podcast.
Okay.
And you can reach me. I do it weekly. It's Authentic Living with Roxanne, where I just discuss lots of different things related to relationships and authenticity at home, but also at work. And what it takes for us to be more connected to ourselves.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Roxanne. Before we end, is there anything else that you would kind of like to put in the air for the
Well, I
audience?
think I think what I would like your audience to think about is, and I know most people are here are they coming out of relationships or looking for new relationships or healing some of the past
It's a lot of mixture. Uh,
mixture.
it's a
So
mixture,
I often say that most of us don't have ideal upbringings where all our needs were met in what we would call a safe, secure attachment style from our primary kind of environment. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn it. And
right?
you are not defined by based on what you've been exposed to. So it
Right.
starts with you.
Hmm.
Understand, what are my emotional
Right.
needs? Because if I don't understand them, how in turn am I going to pull that in or recognize when something's good for me or when it's not good for me?
Right.
So I think that those are the last words that I would say is, work on yourself first,
Right.
get connected, like you for who you are. We're all so
Okay.
unique and beautiful.
That's
And
right.
then when you go out there, you're going to know within, a short period of time, don't jump in too quick.
Yes.
Think about what you value and what that relationship will look like. And you go out and in a way you're interviewing in a bit
Hmm.
to make sure that that person has the right qualities before you step into
Right.
something.
Exactly. That's
Yes.
so true. Interview people and be
Uh,
okay if they don't pass the interview.
if they don't make
Uh,
the mark, you're like,
right.
okay, I guess you're not stepping
Yes.
into this. And then you go on and then you think, what did I learn about myself and what did I learn about relationships? And then go, because the next person up, how do you know if you've not been in a good relationship, if that person in front of you, has the qualities? So
Right.
give yourself time, learn to like learn to like your own
Exactly.
space.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so I know I just asked one more question, but when you say you are not defined by who you've been exposed to, that kind of made me think about what is it called? The geogram? Is that what it's called?
Genogram. Yeah.
Genogram. So is it important for people to kind of look back sometimes, or is it
It
important
is.
not?
It is. Yeah, it is important to look back because those
Hmm.
sometimes are underlying unknown messages. Or maybe I
Yeah.
think that um, maybe the thought is a man should take care of all my needs. Maybe that's the unconscious thought.
Wow.
But how realistic is that
That's
in a healthy relationship? Well,
yeah.
sometimes a man needs to take care of all your needs, but not all the time. But if you're in that unconscious space, you're going into it with
Yeah.
that.
It's like
You're
you want him to be your source or something.
right, exactly. So, how
Yeah.
healthy is that
Yeah.
blocking belief around relationships?
Yeah.
If you really want something healthy. So that's what I mean. That's what it's helpful. You
Mhm.
start to understand how you think. You start to understand your body when you're
Okay, yeah.
triggered. Is this a triggering feeling for a reason? Our
Right.
body holds all of our emotions. So
Mhm.
getting more connected to that space is important so that when you are working through things in whatever reality, you're recognizing and be able to go inside and say, is this good for me?
Right. Okay. Well, Roxanne Derhodge, I thank you, like I said before, so much for lending us your time, your expertise, and your testimony. If you all are interested in hooking up with Roxanne, we're going to put a link, first of all, for the book, right?
Yes.
We're going to put a link down there, and there you can also find her at www.roxanderhodge.com. And we will see you next time. And let's stay in contact, Roxanne, okay?
Absolutely. Would love to.
All right. Bye bye.